So, we are officially finished with the NFL draft, the NFL free agency, and we now have all of the games for all 32 teams, who they'll be playing, where they'll be playing them, and most importantly, when they'll be playing them. And last year, I did a little rambly video, mainly for myself, where I kind of gave my opinions on the Bills coming into the 2021 season, how their offseason moves went and their draft and their schedule, and just kind of gave my overall predictions. And, I think I predicted 13-4, and I predicted, more of the same as far as success all around the board. I think the biggest area where I was correct was my prediction of John Brown and Emmanuel Sanders being basically interchangeable as that like wide receiver number 2-3 ish option, because I was like, Emmanuel Sanders is probably going to give you 600 to 700 yards, handful of touchdowns, decent statistics, and that's exactly what he ended up doing. I mean, he was like 5 or 6 touchdowns and like 7 or 650 yards, so that was pretty cool. I think the area in which I was most wrong about, I guess you could say the division race. I had predicted that the Bills would win the AFC East pretty handily within, by at least 2, maybe even 3 games. And the Bills actually had it come down to the wire, like week 18, final week of the season, until they clinched, which was very surprising, not something I expected. They also did not surpass or even, I guess, in a way, come close to my win total, which, I had 13-4. They ended up going 11-6. And I want to say, I haven't watched it really recently, but I feel like they were shaping up to meet Kansas City again in the playoffs like they did the year before, and they did. And unfortunately, it just so happened to be in the divisional round instead of the championship game. And, it's water under the bridge now. It is what it is. And it's a moot point, but, I've made it when the context lines up. But I strongly believe the Bills would have beaten the Bengals and the Rams just because on a matchup basis and just based on how those teams played, especially in the Super Bowl and in their championship games, respectively. Shout out to the Bengals, though. They actually did. I mean, Mahomes was terrible, and I think that's the reason they won. Still, they still came very close to winning the Super Bowl. But, both the Super Bowl teams, and I made a ramble about it as well, personally, about just the Super Bowl itself, but they both played pretty scared, and neither of them really took command of the game, despite each of them at certain points trying to let the other one kind of break the game open. And I think the Bills opportunities presented themselves, they would have taken advantage. And, obviously, once again, water under the bridge. I'm a bitter Bills fan, blah, 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 blah. But I think the Bills would have broken both of those games open against both of those teams had those same opportunities presented themselves. But at the end of the day, there is no such thing as the transitive property in the NFL. Because, damn near every good team last year lost to a vastly inferior team. And that's just how it goes, and that's why doing my predictions last year for breaking up the season, I tried to do 4 weeks, 4 to 5 games at a time, just because, the Bills play the Jets, the Dolphins, the Steelers, and the Ravens, and they go 3-1. And I'm like, okay, they're going to beat the 3 lesser teams and lose to the 1 good team. But they end up beating the Ravens, the Steelers, the Dolphins, and lose to the Jets, which are significantly worse than those other 3 teams. I'm going to spare myself of enough, criticism, I guess, or how wrong I was. When in reality, I'm just going to say, I don't know who they're going to lose or win to, but I feel like based on this slew of games, they're probably going to win 4 of these 5 or 5 or 3 of these 5. But anyway, I kind of want to talk about the Bills offseason somewhat briefly. Last year they kept more or less the same cast of characters and just tried to run it back. The NFL, it's not that easy. Clearly, look at the Bucks and look at the Bills. I mean, they Both of them, if you want to look strictly objectively in terms of, I believe, their win total and also their postseason performance, both of those teams regressed. I guess the Bucks did win their division, but still, they made it to the divisional round instead of the Super Bowl, and the Bills made it to the divisional round instead of the AFC Championship, as opposed to, where they were at in the seasons prior, or the previous season. But the Bills have actually made quite a few moves. They actually got rid of quite a few players who've been around for a while. Some of the names they got rid of, Jerry Hughes, Darrell Williams, AJ Klein. You want to look at guys like Justin Zimmer, Levi Wallace, Mario Addison, Cole Beasley, Starlo Tulele. Like, there were a lot of players that they were like that have been around ever since the Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott era really started, kind of got the ball rolling, like 2019 on, where they, have made the playoffs the last 3 years. A lot of those players are gone, like a lot of those players, they have pieced out. And, for better or worse, it is what it is. For me, I think every season is its own thing. And based on the players that the Bills have, I think that with the quarterback, and the weapons offensively, and I hate to do this, but it is such an offensive-dominated game at this point in time, I think the Bills will be fine. What's the difference between winning 11 and 12 games when you get the same seed, and you win your division all the same? Like, I don't really – it doesn't matter to me. You know what I mean? That's what I'm trying to say. So as much as I'm going to miss, having a Cole Beasley or having somebody like Mario Addison or Jerry Hughes, two guys who have been really, really nice contributors on the Bills for a number of years, especially Jerry Hughes, one of the longest tenured Bills that I can remember. He has been on that team, especially like significant player. You want to look back at like the Jim Schwartz days and stuff for a very long time. And it's crazy to see him going to be on a different team next year, or I don't believe he's been signed yet. So shout out to Jerry Hughes, one of my all-time favorite defensive players, for better or for worse. I still think he wasn't the greatest at bringing the quarterback down, but he could get to the quarterback. He could beat tackles with that spin move pretty fucking well. All right, he was definitely an underrated player. But anyway, for all those players they cut, they did bring in several pretty significant free agent players. You look at guys like O.J. Howard, who in my opinion is a damn good tight end who is going to work wonders, hopefully with Dawson Knox, knock on wood. All of these things are subject to possible attrition, but you cannot predict that. But you look at guys like O.J. Howard, you look at Jamison Crowder, who in my opinion has been the lone bright spot on that Jets offense the past couple of years. You bring in a damn good offensive lineman to offset getting rid of Darrell Williams and John Feliciano in Roger Saffold. And you go out and you grab, the guy, Von Miller, to set your defense apart. Because you've got several, really good players on that defense. Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, Tre'Davious White. But up front, you're really missing that big piece, and they went out and they got Von Miller. And, after next season, they have an out if they want to cut him because he's going to be 35 or 36 years old and not producing to the point where he's getting paid $20-something million a year. They can do that. They can get rid of him after 2 years, despite signing him to a 6-year contract. And so I love the offseason. It's one of those things where it's like, man, I can't believe we're getting rid of this guy. I can't believe we're getting rid of Levi Wallace. We're getting rid of, Jerry Hughes, Cole Beasley. But, and as many players as they cut, they didn't sign as many in free agency, but of course we have the draft, So I think, in my opinion, I prefer who they got in free agency versus who they lost, which is pretty amazing considering all of the players they got rid of. But between The free agent signings that they picked up, obviously the one I'm by far most excited about is Von Miller, because I think that he will be the one who's going to consistently get the most snaps at a position where you'll be able to really tell where he's like making a difference. Obviously, Roger Saffold is going to be getting so much playing time because he's going to be a starter on that offensive line, and I have high hopes for him being a very good player. But it's hard to really know and like distinguish unless you're like an advanced analytics guy. Like, damn, that offensive lineman, man, he is so goddamn good. Blah 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 blah. He's changing the way that this team's offense is running. I don't know, but yeah, I think Von Miller will have the biggest impact. Be interested to see how things go with OJ Howard, though, and how much playing time he gets, because when Dawson Knox did go down, Tommy Sweeney was dog shit. So having a second tight end for if Dawson Knox does go down, as well as being able to run 2 tight end sets, very excited about that. And it wouldn't surprise me if maybe OJ Howard's not going to get more than a couple hundred yards receiving, but it wouldn't surprise me if you see him get like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 touchdowns. Like, he could be a big time red zone threat, and he's a big ass body, and he had all the potential in the world. He's still young, and I just think that he was kind of a mixture of being injured and just being buried in that depth chart, and a lack of efficient utilization in Tampa is what ultimately, in my opinion, drove him out of Tampa. And so I'm excited for him. Jamison Crowder, I think he is going to plug and play. And just like I said about Emmanuel Sanders and John Brown, I feel like Cole Beasley and Jamison Crowder will be somewhat interchangeable. They do different things despite being just kind of little quick slot guys. Crowder is much more explosive. Maybe doesn't have the separation / hands and just overall grittiness of a Cole Beasley that I will miss. At the same time, I think he's going to be a great player for us. And I'm very excited, straight up. Defensively, like I said, I'm going to miss Jerry. I'm going to miss Levi. But at the end of the day, I did like what the Bills did in free agency, and then in the draft, first 3 rounds obviously are where you're going to get your most impact players. I assumed that was going to happen last year, and honestly, of the top 3 rounded players that we drafted last year, the only one that really made a significance, aside from Greg Russo, who had a couple nice games, was our boy Spencer Brown, who was a damn good rookie, dude. He played well for a rookie tackle. But Russo and Basham, jury's still out, and we'll see how much playing time they get with a guy like Von Miller. Hopefully Russo takes that starting job and he gets more snaps, but we might be going with a D-line rotation committee thing that they've been doing for the past whoever knows how long. But yeah, in the draft, Tre'Davious White unfortunately will be out for probably the first half of the season, considering he tore his ACL in November, and I want to say that's like 10 to 12 month recovery. So, he may not be back until, like week 6, week 7, which is fine. I would so much rather have him come back later in the season and be perfectly healthy and not be prone to re-injury, as opposed to him coming back too soon. Once again, and I know it's not necessarily something that's tangibly, like, you can't necessarily back this up, and it's not incredibly verifiable or reputable, I guess, or credible. But with a guy like Josh Allen, your team does not have to be perfect. All right, so yes, Tre'Davious White is a fantastic player, a great defensive back, one of the best corners in the NFL. But not having him is not going to dramatically, the Bills could win 12 games with or without him, basically. He's not going to break your back like somebody, Stephon Diggs or Josh Allen especially, I think that they can get away without him, although, of course, they want to have him in the fold, and I hope that he comes back as soon as possible. But we drafted a guy like Kaiir Elam, who, maybe thrusted into that cornerback number 1 spot. Maybe not. It's hard to know. But nonetheless, I trust and believe that he will be good enough and will survive being our cornerback 1/2. Because, that's essentially what happened with with Tre'Davious White. I mean, he was basically thrusted into the situation, and they run the similar kind of defense where you can, you're not going to be man to man all by yourself the whole fucking time. They'll ease him in there, and you've got guys on the back end like Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, where you will be in a great position to succeed, right? And so I'm not worried about that. But the second round, there was a lot of people who really wanted Breece Hall, or they really wanted Kenneth Walker, and the Bills had to, in the words of honestly a lot of the Bills Mafia, settle, no pun intended, shout out to Tim, for James Cook. And in my opinion, I don't know a ton about all the NFL draft prospects, especially with all the defensive backs that went in the first round, like Stingley and Sauce Gardner and all of those motherfuckers. Like, I couldn't tell you. But when it comes to Cook, the thing that I'm excited about, the thing that I like the most, is that he is a versatile pass catcher. But you do have a guy like Devin Singletary in the backfield who is pretty consistent and who is, has produced somewhat decently in the past, where you don't find yourself needing to get a guy like Najee Harris, who's literally going to be on the field like 90% of the time you have a running back on the field. But at the same time, I feel like James Cook, in a way, is going to be similar to a Devin Singletary, where he's not going to command the lion's share of the snaps. That being said, I think it will be almost entirely Singletary and Cook, which I'm cool with that. There won't be any downtime where Moss or Breida get the ball and just do absolutely nothing with it. So I'm cool with it, but my expectations for Cook are not as high as, somebody like a Breece Hall would have been, or, different side of the ball. But, I'm fully anticipating getting some solid starting play out of Kyer Elam from the gun. With Cook, I don't even know, I wouldn't draft him in free agency, basically. I'm not expecting him to get a ton of production. But we'll have to wait and see. You just never know. You just never know. And then they also drafted a linebacker in round 3, Terrell Bernard. They got rid of A.J. Klein. So, outside of, I think right now we have Dodson, we have Edmonds, and we have Milano. So he'll probably get some playing time. I know a lot of people are kind of eyeballing Edmonds and being like, "Hey, buddy, you're on the way out, and we got your 5th-year option, but we might not sign it if we're drafting Bernard in the 3rd round after we just signed Matt Milano," and that's very much true and something to think about. But we'll have to wait and see. Personally, I've always been a big fan of Tremaine Edmonds, despite all of the criticisms he has justifiably gotten recently. I still think that his upside physically is absurd, and he's shown that out several times. So, it is what it is. But yeah, I'm looking for those 3 guys, basically, to make some sort of impact. For all I know, somebody like a Shakir from round 5 or punter or whatever could make a huge impact, but, you can't really bank on a guy in round 5 or 6 to actually, project into being really productive. It's just not, it can happen, and it very well might, but the odds of it are pretty slim to none. So I'm not going to bother with that. But yeah, spent a really long time talking about the Bills off-season moves and just kind of in general how things have transpired the last few months. But I think it's kind of important to get some perspective because once again, I'm going to be listening to this down the line, and I kind of want to hear my headspace and what I thought of the moves. I thought the Bills draft was pretty good, and I thought their free agency was really good. So moving on to their schedule, which finally dropped, and I think the first thing that sticks out to me is the Bills have the most primetime matchups of anybody in the NFL, or they're tied for it. Which is awesome. I finally love to see the Bills get that respect. I know a lot of fans and things like that are like, "Oh, I don't really care. I like being an underdog." For me, I'd be listening to Pro Football Talk. I'd be listening to Skip and Shannon Undisputed. Sometimes I eat up basically anytime the Bills are the subject of discussion on any type of sports media outlet. I'm always listening because I'm really interested to see what they have to say about somebody like Josh Allen, or just in general a franchise like the Bills, who is pretty prolific in its futility lately, and just to see what they kind of have to say, because as small of a market as the Bills are, they still don't get a lot of respect, and they still don't get a lot of people paying attention to them. And I'm interested to see how ignorant people are, or how truly attentive they are, because there are so many ignorant sports talk figures. As much as I love Skip and Shannon, they do not pay any attention to anything Bills related. They don't give him any respect. And that's just in general kind of how it is. Your young quarterbacks are Mahomes, Burrow, Herbert. Nobody ever really says Josh Allen, and it is what it is. And a lot of people don't really care. And me, I don't care a ton, but it would be kind of nice to hear, Josh Allen and the Bills be kind of a mainstay, as opposed to, Deshaun Watson and the Browns and Baker Mayfield and Russell Wilson and Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady get all the spotlight, when in reality I think Josh Allen is just as good, if not better, than all of those guys. But anyway, the Bills have the most prime thing. They also have the best odds. I don't know if they're tied for, or if they have slightly better odds, but they're among the top betting odds for Vegas for the Super Bowl, which is crazy. And in my opinion, I think it's valid. I know a lot of people are outraged because they didn't even make it to the championship game, and they're favorites to win the Super Bowl. But I mean, come on, watch the game. That team, I legitimately think, could have beaten anybody in the championship round that was left. Bengals, Chiefs, Rams, 49ers, Bills could have beat them all. I'm just going to keep it a buck. But, it is what it is. It's as amazing as Patrick Mahomes played at the end of that game, just like Josh Allen did. He played just as bad towards the end, and that's just unbelievable. I still can't believe it. But anyway, enough window dressing, or whatever the hell the phrase is. The Bills' schedule, it's out. So they have, I'm going to break it up into, I guess, quarters, with the final being the last 5 games. And so the Bills starting out the season for the whole league. Thursday Night Football, the Bills travel to play the reigning Super Bowl champions in what a lot of people are kind of throwing out there at this point early on, and just in general, based on Vegas odds, is this is going to be the Super Bowl matchup. We're going to get a rematch, and all predictions go to the Rams in the NFC and the Bills in the AFC, which is, I'll give my thoughts on that. I don't think it's too far-fetched, personally. But you look at the Rams, they're obviously a great team. They just won the Super Bowl. They have Cooper Kupp, who is going to be not playing a guy like Tre'Davious White, actually. He's going to be playing a guy like Kaiir Elam, and he is going to have his work cut out for him. I just scared the shit out of myself. And so I think that's something to look out for. And, for me, I'm no longer of the belief that a spotlight is too big or isn't too big for Josh Allen. I think that's hogwash. In my opinion, for Matt Stafford's sake, I still am of the belief that he is not foolproof when it comes to the bright lights. I know he won the Super Bowl, but goddamn, I refuse to believe that he did not let the 49ers and the Bengals, I'm not going to say anything about the Bucs because it was the fumbling, it wasn't him throwing interceptions, but against the 49ers, that interception he should have thrown to Jimmy Ward, as well as the several interceptions he threw against the Bengals. I swear, those should have been taken advantage of, right? And I still don't think he is that dude in the biggest of games. And he got shit for it in Detroit, and it's because his teams were bad. But I think that's part of him is staying with him. And so I think the Bills should be favored in this game, despite it being a road game. I think hella Bills fans will be there. And I'm not going to go prediction by prediction, but at the end of the day, though, I do think the Bills should be favored in just about every single game they play in. But their first four are pretty brutal because after they play the Rams in primetime, they kick off the season. They do get like a damn near a whole bye week because they go from playing Thursday to a Monday. So they get an extra 4 days of rest or 5 days of rest, damn near. I think it's 4. Can't do math. Can't count days in the week. But they get to play the Tennessee Titans, who, they don't have Julio Jones or A.J. Brown anymore, and they still have Ryan Tannehill. And so for that reason, it's not far-fetched to believe that they're not the same team that is, looking to repeat as the 1 seed in the AFC. But I still think that they're a good team. I still think that they are more than capable of giving the Bills a run for their money, and they're still a tough out, especially with Derrick Henry, who will in all likelihoods will be playing. And last year in Monday Night Football, the Bills, unfortunately, whether it's a slip of Josh Allen or not, they did lose on Monday night to the Titans. And the year before, they lost in primetime on like a weird COVID Tuesday night to the Titans. So the Bills are not immune to losing to the Titans in primetime with Josh Allen in his final form. So something to take into consideration. And then the Bills get a date in Miami in week 3, which will be very interesting to see what's going on there early on, especially with all of the moving parts. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Tua. How is it all going? Is it still, got some growing pains that early on in the season? Josh Allen usually dominates the Dolphins. We'll see. And then, they finish out that first 4 game stretch with the Baltimore Ravens, who, despite me not really thinking Lamar Jackson is all that great of a passer, he still, at the end of the day, is a solid quarterback and a proven winner, former league MVP. Not a team you want to sneeze at. Their injuries last year were absurd, including losing a guy like Lamar Jackson. So that's the reason why they were an 8-win team last year. I do not think that they'll be an 8-win team next year unless, knock on wood, you've got some sort of, out of control injury bug that just ravages that team. They're going to be a tough out. So these first 4 games are against 4 quality opponents. The Dolphins won 10 games the year before, and they won 9 games last year. So, personally, I think the Bills will probably go 2-2 in this first 4 game stretch. I would be satisfied with that. I have no problems with them dropping 2 of these games. 3-1 would be pretty realistic as well, to be optimistic. 4-0 I think is too tall of an ask, and I think 1-3 is a little too pessimistic. For me, I'm going to go 2-2. I am. And once again, they could, beat the Rams and Titans and lose to the Dolphins and Ravens, or, they could, beat the Ravens and the Titans and lose to the Rams and Dolphins. We just don't know. We just don't know. And so the next bit of their schedule, once again, in my opinion, you got some pretty solid teams in here. You're going to be able to host the Steelers, 1 o'clock game. We don't know what they're going to be. Their quarterback position is kind of a shit show. It has been for a while, but still. And then you get to go to Kansas City again for the 3rd game in a row in Kansas City, which is just whatever. 4th game, actually. Both playoff games, and then this game and the regular season game last year. As well as hosting the Green Bay Packers, a game that I am very hopeful to be in attendance for. And then you go to the Jets. So obviously the Jets, not a very good team. I don't think they're going to be good next year. I'm sorry, they were terrible the year before. I assumed they were going to be terrible this year. They were terrible this year. And in 2022, I expect maybe a slight improvement, but more or less the same. But you never know. They have a second-year quarterback, so they could be actually really good. Not really good, but, you could see some improvement there. But the Chiefs and Packers, they're still the cream of the crop. They still have the 2 other top-tier quarterbacks. In my opinion, you could throw Tom Brady in there as well. There are 4 elite quarterbacks right now who are head and shoulders above the rest. And so you've got to play 2 of them, which, that's a tall task. I want to say 3-1. I'm not going to say 2-2 though, because I think the Bills are decisively better than both the Steelers and the Jets. And I refuse to say they'll, in a 4-game stretch where you play 2 good teams, 2 bad teams, I refuse to say you'll beat the good teams, or you'll beat the bad teams, lose to the good teams. I'm going to say the Bills go 3-1 in this stretch. I do. I think between the Packers and the Chiefs, they split one of those games, and I like their odds of winning the other 2 against the lesser opponents. So we'll go 3-1. And then the next bit of their schedule considerably lax than the first 2 as far as playing any absolute powerhouses. That being said, based on certain circumstances, these teams should not be taken lightly. All right, you have a team, you get to host the Vikings. Say what you want about how mediocre they've been the past couple of years. Kirk Cousins is a solid quarterback. They have weapons for days. Thielen, they have Jefferson, they have Cook. They have a new defensive regime, new head coach. So, because their defense has been terrible, and what's really been weighing them down the past 2 years, ever since they lost the Niners in the playoffs a couple years ago. So they're not somebody to take lightly, but, once again, are they in the echelon of the Chiefs or the Packers? No, they're a fringe playoff team. But then you also have the Browns, who you are hosting. This one has a big asterisk next to it. With Deshaun Watson, I think the Browns are they're in that top-tier echelon for sure. Without him, though, once again, I think the Bills should be able to take care of business relatively easily. And then you have the Lions on Thanksgiving, which serves as another primetime game. At 12:30, they're going to have the day game, which I am pretty excited for. Usually for me, I travel. I usually have multiple Thanksgivings. I'll be one place in the morning / afternoon and another place in the evening. So I might stay at that one place until the second game starts. But that's exciting. The Lions, they're not a good team, just like the Jets were terrible in year 1 of their rebuild. I figured they would be bad in year 2. They were. Same thing applies to me, in my opinion, for the Lions. I think they're going to be, 4 to 6-1 team. Not worried about them. They always lose in prime time on Thanksgiving, it seems. And then you round off this 4-game stretch, traveling to Foxborough for a Monday night game against the Patriots. So it seems like the Bills just get one primetime game after another. They get them back to back. They start off the season that way, and then here halfway through, give or take, you have another instance of that. Patriots, I think it's safe to say, unless it's, snowing cats and dogs, the Bills pretty much have Bill Belichick's number minus Tom Brady. That game in which they lost, that's one of those ones where, if you try and predict each game, there are circumstances that are going to stop you from being able to be consistent with that logic. That being said, I think, unless there's something crazy happens, I just can't see the Bills, after what they did to them in the playoffs and just in general, how they are a bad matchup for the Patriots, straight up. Just how they are explosively and just in general, I think elite quarterbacks bode well against the Patriots. It's those teams that don't quite have that it quarterback that really struggle. And, there's only 8 or 9 really good quarterbacks in the NFL, and the vast majority of the teams the Patriots play don't have great quarterbacks, which is, in my opinion, the reason why they were able to make the playoffs last year. Anyway, I think the Bills should have, barring Deshaun Watson, I think they'll have an easy time, frankly, with all of these teams. And I'm not quite optimistic enough to say they'll go 4-0. I'm going to say 3-1, because for all we know, we could get Deshaun Watson playing for the Browns, and that would be a really tough game if that's the case. And also, the Vikings and the Patriots, in my opinion, are both kind of fringe playoff teams. They're both quality opponents. that shouldn't be taken lightly. And then rounding off the schedule with these last 5 games, we get to host the Jets, host the Dolphins. We get to go to Chicago, to Cincinnati for Monday Night Football, and then we don't quite have the official time, if it'll be a primetime game or not, for the Patriots and Bills. That's still to be determined. But you have 3 divisional games in your last 5. And the Bills have dominated the AFC East. And so for that reason, I'm not super concerned or worrisome. The Bills get the Dolphins super early on. They get them super late in the season. So, you probably are going to not be playing the same Dolphins team you beat up on or potentially lost to early on in the season. So that's going to be something to kind of look for. Because, your Tyreek Hill, Tua Tagovailoa connection or lack thereof will be fleshed out at this point. At least I'm assuming so. Because, this is game number, 14? So, should be interesting there. But it's also in the cold of Buffalo. So I think that works in the Bills' favor. The Jets, like I said, I can't expect them to be very good. The last time they beat the Bills was Josh Allen's rookie season. So the Bears, I think, are terrible. They don't have Matt Nagy anymore, so that's good for them to finally get that fucking disaster off of their fucking team, because he was awful. He was just life-sucking, and I could not believe he was an offensive-minded head coach that was able to retain his job for as long as he was able to. But I think the Bills should have an easy time with them as well. Justin Fields, at this point, there's no way he's going to be the same quarterback that he is now at this point, because this is game 15, right? And so we'll know what he is or isn't. So that's something maybe you could look for. It's in Chicago. There's a high chance there might be some crazy weather in that game. And, they still have a pretty good defense. They don't have Khalil Mack anymore, but, they always have pretty stout defenses. So I don't think they might be a slam dunk of a game as you might think, based on how mediocre they've been the last few years, especially last year. But, the big non-divisional game you look at, of course, is the Bengals game, which is, I believe it's a Sunday night. And, it's going to be the 2nd of January. And I will definitely be in attendance. I'll be moving heaven and earth to be in attendance. I'm sure the tickets will be very expensive. It'll be the first Joe Burrow-Josh Allen matchup. Everybody is hailing Joe Burrow as one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL and in the AFC, and seems to have him, damn near ahead of Josh Allen, purely based on the fact that he was able to get to the Super Bowl, which, Jimmy G got to a Super Bowl too, so almost got to a second. I don't know. I don't hold as much. I think Joe Burrow is a good player. I think he's not quite a great quarterback yet, but that winning factor, you cannot discount that. As ridiculous as it is, you can't discount the fact that he did go to the Super Bowl with a very bad team, not a good team, had great weapons, but a bad offensive line and a mediocre defense. Anyway, this is going to be a tough game. No, I think this will definitely be a tough game for the Bills. I would lean towards the Bills in this game, but it would not surprise me if if Joe Burrow somehow finds a way to win, because he's definitely a winner. But I'm very excited for that game. Excuse me, because these are two of the best young AFC teams who haven't played each other yet. These quarterbacks have not played somehow, some way. So, yeah. And then finally, we end off the season hosting the Patriots in a game where, would not surprise me if Josh Allen doesn't play, or if there's just not much to play for. I personally think that the Patriots won't replicate their success from last year. Wouldn't surprise me if they only win 7 or 8 games, and they ended up beating the Bills to finish at 9-8 and miss the playoffs. And the Bills, lose this game, but they didn't have anything to play for seeding wise anyway, so it was just like, fuck it, who cares? But all in all, I think that in this last 5-game stretch, I'm going to say the Bills go 4-1. They definitely will be and could very well be favored in all 5 of these. Even if that really tough game is on the road, I still think they'd probably be favored to beat the Bengals. But once again, I got to be a bit of a realist here, and so especially based on last season, if you were to tell me that they were going to finish 11-6, I'd be like, wow, that's really pushing it. 12-5 is kind of but 11-6, and that's ultimately what happened. And so once I kind of go back here and break it down, 3-1, 2-2, 3-1, or 3-1 and 4-1. What does that come out to? 12-5. 12-5. And with how loaded the AFC is, it's hard to know. Will that be enough to get the 1 seed based on tiebreakers? We'll have to wait and see. You got several teams that could win their division that you're going to be playing. You've got the Titans, you've got the Chiefs, you've got the Ravens, you've got the Bengals. We don't know. There's a lot of things that you just will have to wait and see. How the Titans going to be without A.J. Brown? How are the Ravens going to be without that plethora of injuries that literally handicap their entire team? How are the Bengals going to be with a new revamped offensive line and a whole nother season? How are the Dolphins going to be with all of the new weapons and toys that they got for Tua? There are so many different questions that you just don't have the answers to, and once you get the answers to, are going to massively affect the playoff picture and just in general the AFC as a whole. And so I'm excited. I think 12-5, the Bills are going to win their division again. Part of me wants to say they're going to win it handily again, but last year was a lot closer for comfort, and this schedule is significantly harder, in my opinion, than last year's. But then again, in 2020, they had a really crazy schedule, and they were really good. But I think they'll win the AFC East again. I think they'll get a top 2 seed, I'm going to say. To say they get the 1 seed, I don't know about that. But nonetheless, I'm going 12-5. I think it's going to be another good season. And, third time's the charm of running into Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. I don't know. I think that if you're going to go out in the playoffs, that's probably the best way to do it. You would have loved for it to be in the AFC Championship game or the Super Bowl, but the Bills, they fought, and it was a valiant effort. And even after losing, I think a lot of people still had respect for them and didn't necessarily dock them for losing in losing in the divisional round like you normally would. When like a Super Bowl team like the Ravens a couple of years ago lost to the Titans in the divisional round, But yeah, 12-5. I'm excited to see. I'm going to definitely listen to this back probably right before kickoff. Going to listen to it back middle of the season maybe, at the end of the season, maybe before the draft next year, free agency so far or whatnot. Interested to see how this ultimately holds up for better or for worse. Also, Max, whenever you're watching this in the future, let me know, how is the living situation, how is life in general? Because I'm really interested and excited to know, because life was a lot different a year ago than what it is now.